Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We do have Spanish interpretation available. I'm going to pause for that to be translated one more time.
Para español, por favor, haga clic en el botón interpretación y escoge la opción de español.
I'm Simone Kennel, principal, and I'm really fortunate to have an amazing staff here this evening. My administrative assistant, Noemi Menjivar, and our awesome instructional vice principal administrative assistant, Ofa Talmani, is here this evening, and our wonderful parent coordinator, Lily Quinones, is translating. So we will do introductions, and then we're going to get started. Nick, I think you were going to go and introduce yourself next.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Muse, Administrative Vice Principal, overseeing freshmen and sophomores, last name A through L.
All right, good evening. My name is Emily Rigatti. I'm also an Administrative Vice Principal, and I also work with 9th and 10th graders at the end of the alphabet. So last names M through Z.
And hello, I'm Stephen Emmy. I'm another Administrative Vice Principal, and I work with the 11th and 12th grade students.
And greetings, everybody. I am Carl Loosecoat, the Instructional Vice Principal. I work with all students around scheduling, instruction, and the like. Thank you. Welcome, everybody.
All right, so welcome. We are excited for a return to school in person. We've been working actually all year for this day to come, getting ready. We're going to go through a lot of logistical pieces of information this evening. We are recording the webinar, and we will also post it on our website for future reference. And we will also have the slides there. The slides will also be shared with everybody via email. And I believe we'll be able to post the link in the chat, so you'll be able to have those. So this represents a lot of time, thought, logistical considerations to make coming back to school the best experience it can be, given all the guidance and guidelines we have to have in place. So I am really thrilled. MA had over 1,000 students opt to return and make that commitment. We are excited to see that happen. We are also going to make sure that students get equitable experience, whether they have chosen to return in person or whether they have chosen to remain on distance learning for this semester. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to get started here. I would also ask that for questions and answers, we will try our best to moderate them as we go through the presentation. And if we have time at the end, we will respond to some that are asked most frequently as well. So we're going to do our best to get to most of your questions this evening also. Okay, so we will show you our agenda for the evening. We've done our welcome and introductions. Mr. Loosecoat is going to go over the hybrid schedule overview and talk about group assignments. We're going to review the return to school agreements, our health screening and checks, some really important considerations for spring break traveling and COVID testing, how we've organized the campus, and take your questions and answers. So again, welcome everybody. I'm going to introduce Mr. Loosecoat, who's going to talk to you about the group assignments, because we know that's one question on top of mind for everybody.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kennel. So I think in our last webinar, I stated we would release group assignments on Monday, the 22nd. So we're going to have to push that back to Wednesday, March 24th. So all students, we will send an email that will go out to both students and parents. In that email, students will get their group assignment. The group assignment will say you're assigned to group A1 or B1, and I'll explain that in a second when we look at the schedule. In that email will also be instructions for checking in, a student's lunch area assignment, and reminders that students will need to check their class schedule and assign room numbers in Infinite Campus. We understand that with students not having been on campus, they know their schedule, they know who their teachers are. They may not actually remember where their class or their physical class is held on campus. So they'll need to get onto Infinite Campus and check that room number. As part of the grouping process, what we are working on is we are grouping all siblings together, and they'll be grouped together in that once we get to April 19th, up to when we are up to 50% of students who opted in. At that point, all siblings will be coming on the same days. However, for the first 2 weeks, that may not be the case. So I just want to keep you aware of that. And I also just need to state that it is a complicated process, balancing the schedules with the room capacity. So we are not accepting requests to change groupings. So I just need to be clear on that. If we could go to the next slide, Ms. Menjivar. So this is, an example of what the hybrid schedule will look like for the first 2 weeks. So this is starting April 5th. Again, previously we've labeled the groups A, B, C, and D. When you get your email on next Wednesday, it'll say either group A1, group B1, or group A2, or group B2. And you can see here the group A1 will start on April 5th, right after spring break. They will come on Monday and Tuesday. Group B1 will start on Thursday, April 8th. They will come on Thursday and Friday. And on the next week, groups A2 will come on Monday and Tuesday, and groups B2 will come on Thursday and Friday. So real quick thing about siblings, if I go back one more, Ms. Menjivar. With siblings, it's possible that you could have, a brother in the A1 group and his sister in the A2 group. So that's possible for the first 2 weeks. However, when we combine them, they will both be coming on Monday and Tuesday. And so that's the next slide, Ms. Menjivar. So when we combine them, starting on April 19th, it'll simply be groups A and B, and A is a combination of A1 and A2. So that way, if a student is in A2 coming on Monday and Tuesday, once they're assigned to that Monday, Tuesday slot, they will always come on Monday and Tuesday for the rest of the year. And that'll be the same for group B, which will come on Thursday and Friday. Again, at this point, students will be coming onto campus 2 days a week, every week, until the end of the school year or until finals. Okay, and so I hope that's clear. And finally, as part of the process, while this is a webinar for families, we have a mandatory orientation webinar for students. So all students must attend one, again, virtually, and one of them will be Monday, next Monday, March 22nd, and the second one will be Thursday, March 25th, both at 1:30 to 2 after class gets out. There will be in the webinar, students will complete an orientation acknowledgement, which is required for them to return onto campus. Okay, they'll need to have this completed before coming on. Okay, I think that's it. I'm going to then pass off to Mr. Muse, our wonderful and articulate administrative vice principal.
Thank you, Carl. I think I speak for everybody when I express my excitement at the imminent arrival of your students to our campus, or back to our campus in many cases. We are, however, in a pandemic, so our return to campus will be quite different, as we all know. And so I want to review some of the health and safety agreements that you and your student have already signed off on when you submitted your intent to return forms. But I just want to reiterate some of the common agreements that we really want to emphasize as students return to campus, because following these guidelines and adhering to these principles and committing to these procedures will really help us keep everyone safe who is on our campus. So if we could go to well, actually, I'll go over this slide. Prior one, please. So a lot of this is very common knowledge at this point, but we do want to emphasize that these are the actions that students should choose to take every day when they are on our campus. We need them to wear masks and to have masks. When they arrive on campus, we do have extras available, but we really want to emphasize not only mask wearing, but effective mask wearing, something that we will work with students on next week. We really need to have students commit to maintaining 6 feet of distance between them, especially during lunchtime, as I'll explore later. That is 6 feet of distance is now axiomatic for many of us, but we really need to have students commit to that, especially during lunch. We have designated bathrooms by area of campus, and we need students to commit to using those bathrooms and those bathrooms alone while they're in those areas. Hand washing practices. Certainly we want students to practice while they are on campus as well. We will be conducting health screenings before students enter the campus, and there are some mechanics of that which we will also review with students on Monday and Thursday of next week. And the final two are equally important. If a student is at all unwell, it feels any symptoms, we really need your student to commit to being open and honest about those symptoms, however excited they may be about coming to campus, and communicate with us and with you about their symptoms should they have them. We will be exploring going over the sign-in and dismissal procedures a little bit later, but we want to maintain our campus safely, and that involves having very clear processes for signing in and for dismissal that we're also going to go over next week with students. And we need them to commit to those procedures because our success as a school community depends on their commitment to the procedures that we have diligently set up for them. Next slide, please. Needless to say, we will need your help as we communicate our expectations to students. So in the run-up to the return to campus, when you have a moment, just to emphasize the importance of adhering to what we think are pretty simple principles to follow. And by all means discuss the importance of following these precepts when on campus. And we just have to emphasize too that first and foremost, we want to keep our campus safe. And if we have students who, for whatever reason, are unable to consistently commit to these basic principles and agreements, we may have to ask a student to continue their semester learning from home. I'll go over attendance a little bit later, so I'll skip that last bullet point. Next slide, please. So in terms of in-person attendance, I know it's a favorite topic this year. Things will be a little bit different when we return to in-person learning. Teachers will now have 2 ways to mark attendance. And one of those ways obviously will be to mark whether a student is physically there, who should be there that day. So that will be, those students will be separately visible in a teacher's attendance records on Infinite Campus that day. We need us to treat attendance to school just like we normally do. So if your student will be absent, we ask that you contact our attendance office before the start of the day so we can make note of that. If a student is absent from school and that absence is not excused, a phone call will go home in that case. We want to make sure that we all are aware of where our students are. If a student, for whatever reason, is not well enough to come to school physically when scheduled to do so, they obviously can and should log on to Zoom from home. We don't have the mechanism currently in place to mark that student as having virtually participated. We have to mark that student physically absent, but a teacher can make a note of the student's participation in class in his or her records. So fundamentally with attendance, and this is something we've emphasized all year, it's really important for students to be in class when they're able to do so. When students are in class, they have the opportunity to engage, whether virtually or in person, and that leads to learning. And so that really should be our emphasis collectively when we talk about attendance. Next slide. So it may happen that we have a student who, for whatever reason, struggles with following the health and safety agreements, whether it's keeping masks on in class or maintaining 6 feet of distance during lunch while eating, or wandering outside of their designated lunch zone. We, as always, aim towards a restorative model, meaning that we see every incident like this as an opportunity for us to learn and to gain a common understanding. That said, as I mentioned before, we are in a pandemic. And so we want to be very clear with students and families about how we're going to approach an incident or an infraction in violation of our health and safety agreements. So, as is always the case, we follow a progressive discipline model. We will warn a student if there's an issue with any of these agreements. If that same behavior happens again, or any other violation of the health and safety agreements happens for a second time, that will mean an office referral. And I should mention that all of the AVPs will be setting up satellite offices outside in various parts of the campus to be closer to the action, and also just to be more supportive to staff and students, more immediately supportive. But if a student is unable to or unwilling to have a mask on during class, we'll find a place for that student to continue to learn alongside us, and we will certainly call home so we can collaborate on steering the student in the right direction. The third infraction will require us to have a more formal meeting, so we can find a way past whatever the issue might be. And the fourth infraction, unfortunately, that will mean that we will invite the student to go home and remain on full-time distance learning for the rest of the semester. So again, we want our students to be here, but we also want to keep everybody safe during what remains a very challenging time in terms of COVID. So thank you for your collaboration and your understanding. And I will turn it over to Mr. Emmy.
Thank you, Mr. Muse. So I'm going to just briefly cover our instruction. Because we will still be technology-based, that technology is very important. Every student will need to bring a fully charged laptop or Chromebook to school every day with them. If a student does need a Chromebook, please come and check one out before we start back on April 5th. And you can call the school, and our staff will be happy to assist you in doing so. Chromebook pickup times are 9 a.m. to 3:45 daily from campus. Students also will need to have headphones. We will have student headphones, basic ones that are available for all students. But if you'd like something different, you would need to get that. We are working on creating outdoor charging stations and solutions for charging stations within the classrooms themselves. And we'll have something ready for all of us on April 5th. We can do the next slide. So our instruction model is hybrid, as we've talked about all year, roomers and Zoomers. So teachers will be in their rooms with students, with a number of students, and the remainder of the class will be participating on Zoom from home. And so all students will be using distance learning tools, and teachers will be continuing to use engagement strategies that they've been using on Zoom. And this is really about creating an equitable delivery model so that students who are at home are learning and getting the content in equal way as the students that are in the classroom. And again, the bell schedule will remain the same for all students. And I believe I'm handing this off to Ms. Brigatti.
All right. So arriving to campus is going to be different than last year before COVID. And this is kind of a morning checklist for as a parent. This is something you're going to want to check daily. Students are going to be expected to complete a frontline health screening. It can be completed online. There's also an app for a cell phone that it can be completed on, and more information will be coming to students in the orientations next week and also on Wednesday next week. Extra masks and hand sanitizer, make sure that's in their backpack. Students are going to be required to wear a lanyard with their student ID since we're not able to see their faces, and this is for security reasons. And so those will be distributed the first day your child is on campus. Make sure that in their backpack, they also have a laptop, Chromebook charger, and headphones. And again, echoing what Mr. Emmy said about making sure that that device is fully charged. And then because of increased ventilation and increase of bringing in outside air, the classrooms can get chilly. And so make sure they have something warm to wear. Next slide, please. We briefly went over this in our the webinar last week, 2 weeks ago. It's all blurring together. So our student check-in process, they'll enter at a designated door. They have to show that they've completed their health screening. They'll receive one wristband to show that they're cleared, and then a second wristband, which designates their lunch area. And lunch areas, I saw there was a question about lunch. It is 5 areas, and they're divided into different color zones and also dependent on the classes they have near those zones. Next slide, please. And so these are the 5 zones on campus. So there's a zone 1, which is blue, zone 2, which is red, zone 3 is yellow, 4 is green, and 5 is orange. And our hallways, for the most part, unless they're really wide, are one way. And there are now, instead of 2 entrances, which I know we talked about last time, in working through the logistics and the numbers of students returning to campus, there are now 3 entrances, and students will be entering by last name. We ask that you respect this because we need to check in at 100 to 200 to 300 students all at once in 30 minutes. And so we need your cooperation on this. So entrance 1 is in the back by the athletic lot, and that's for families with last names A through G. Entrance 2 is in the front outside the administration building, kind of right near Pride Hall. That's for last names H through Q. And then entrance 3 is a little bit more towards the side in front of Hello Hall or the AVP office side door. And that is for last names R through Z. Next slide, please. Health check-in begins every morning at 8:15. First classes start at 8:45 if they have a first or a second period. Please do not drop off your student or have your student arrive earlier than 8:15. And students who arrived late and after 9 a.m., all the doors will be closed and they actually have to go and check in at the administrative office. We also got questions last time around if your child does not have a first or a second period, then they would just check in at the administrative office before they arrive to their class in a timely manner. Next slide, please. Again, these are pictures of our hallways. They're designated as one way. This is very, very important, and we need students to make sure that they follow those directions. Next slide. All right, classrooms. So once a student goes straight to class after they've checked in, they are expected to wipe off their desks before they sit down and then before they leave. They are expected to enter one student at a time, and they are expected to leave one student at a time. If you've been on campus recently, we haven't had bells, and so we will be reinstating bells once April 5th starts. And there is, so for specific classroom setups, for the most part, most classes will be held within the classrooms. And you saw pictures of this before. There were desks with plexiglass, they're spaced apart. There are some exceptions to this, and those are PE classes and possible visual and performing arts classes. PE classes might be in and outside in a designated area. There'll be contingency plans, obviously, for rain. Students will not be dressing out for PE. And the visual and performing arts classes like band and choir, that varies by teacher. Students will be contacted by their teacher for specific locations for PE. And they need to check Infinite Campus for their room assignments for all other classes. I believe, am I passing this off? I don't actually have it in front of me.
I'll take it, Mr.
Great, thank you.
All right. So we're going to show this map once again. This is our campus map, and you can see the arrows indicating which directions we will have all people moving through the hallways. But we'll also see these color-coded lunch zones. This is where students will be eating. We are working diligently to make all of these spaces wonderfully polka dotted with stickers indicating 6 feet of distance for students. We're painting circles 6 feet in diameter as well, just to underscore the importance of students being together, physically distant but socially connected during lunch. When it comes to breakfast and lunch, as I said, we're going to be assigning students a lunch area based on the class location. More information will come to students next week with the general communication that Mr. Lusco will be sending out. Students will be fully supervised during lunch by not only ourselves, but parent volunteers and campus aides. And as we will emphasize to students throughout, we of course expect them to take their masks off while they eat and drink, but while they are talking and eating and drinking, we really need them to be 6 feet apart. Our mantra will be eat on the dot, because that's where they will be socially distanced or physically distanced from each other. Regarding our food agreements, once again, we want students to only eat in those designated lunch areas 6 feet apart from each other. Hand washing strongly encouraged. Much as we hate to not have students share food or drink in the communal spirit that's so much part of our school, we do not encourage sharing of food or drink during this time of the pandemic. While students wait in line for their lunch, we will require them to wear masks as they wait. And of course, students can bring their own food or drink to be eaten at school. We sadly will also not allow students to eat inside their classrooms. It is normally a staple of school life for students and teachers to gather inside classrooms to break bread and to connect. But if that happens, it will happen outdoors, not in classrooms. In terms of restrooms, we also will have designated restrooms in each of those lunch areas, color-coded as well. Doors will remain open for ventilation, the external doors, of course, and we will only allow one student in each restroom at a time. We do have color-coded one-use bathroom passes by section of the campus, and the restrooms will be cleaned frequently. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Emmy, who's going to talk about what happens after school.
Thank you, Mr. Muse. So dismissal, we are all following the same bell schedule that we've been following all year, and it's linked in the presentation. Reminder, Mondays and Thursdays, dismissal is at 1:10, and Tuesdays and Fridays, dismissal is at 2:35. Students, because of COVID and because of the safety protocols that we have in place, students are expected to leave campus immediately following dismissal. After school, office hours, we will continue to have those virtually. If a student is on campus and needs to attend office hours, they'll be able to access once they get home. Peer tutoring, tutoring center, writing center, other normally after school activities will be on Zoom and virtually for the remainder of the year. Co-curriculars will meet, but we are moving them to Wednesdays only, and it's dependent upon staff. Athletic practices will continue. We will have limited capacity for student supervision between school dismissal and the start of practices. And since we have a multitude of sports happening at once, given the compacted seasons, it'll be a little hard to manage having a large number of students on campus. We are asking students to return home and come back for their practice start time if it's reasonable to do so. This will really help us to know who is where and when they're there, and it's important for contact tracing. We are working with coaches on solutions for students who may need to be occupied in the interim between school ending and the beginning of practices. And we will continue to do health check-ins for all athletic teams when the students return for those practices. Next. So our transportation options are cycling. Bikes are available through MA on the Move. I know Mr. Nelson has done a lot of work with his bike club, and there are many bikes available. Walking, public transportation, the Samtrans routes are back open, and we do have bus passes available again in our front office. Driving, parking in the senior lot, parking stickers are required at no cost, and we will send out further information when we will be distributing those. And I believe I'm handing this over to Ms. Kennel.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to remind everybody, we are resuming in person after a spring break. Please remember that the pandemic's not over. Although we see much improvement, many around the country getting vaccinated, case counts are downward nationally. It's still being transmitted. So we would ask that during spring break, you avoid traveling in high-risk gatherings. Take proper precautions if you do. Wear masks to protect yourself. Stay 6 feet from others, 2 arms length apart. Avoid crowds. The more people you're in contact with, the more likely you'll be exposed. There are the CDC resources linked there for travel. And what we're also asking is you must let us know if your student or immediate family member tests positive, has either COVID-19 symptoms, or has been diagnosed with COVID-19. You can call our health office or anyone in our vice principal's office, or if they were exposed. That's really, really important information for us to have. We have a link there. We highly, highly encourage testing at least every 2 weeks. You would just need to report to us if a test was positive. The link there is a hyperlink to all the options in our community. We're really, really fortunate to have a lot of options in all of the communities we serve. Most are free, or they will bill back insurance if you have insurance, but please, please take advantage of COVID testing options. I do know some of our seniors who work in food service or coach have had the opportunity to get vaccinated. But remember, it's like 16 and older and 18 and older, depending on which vaccine. So we know many of our students don't have that opportunity. So really, really encourage that. MA staff will be required to test on site at MA Monthly. We just hosted that yesterday and today for our staff. And Gotti is going to talk to you about some volunteers we could use.
Great. We do need volunteers. We need many to help us, especially during lunchtime and especially during morning health screenings. So we do have a flyer, and this is kind of the information that's on it. So we will need help with morning health screenings. These are the times, 8 to 9 a.m. every day but Wednesday. We would love 10 to 20 volunteers a day starting April 5th. For lunch supervision, we also would need lots of help from 11 to 12 every day but Wednesday again. Similar, 10 to 20 volunteers daily starting April 5th. And then for school supervision, these times would be longer on campus, and it would be wonderful to have at least 5 to 10 volunteers daily for school supervision volunteers as well. And if you are interested, please feel free to contact our wonderful administrative assistant, Ofa Taimani. Finally, so we've talked a lot about a lot of information. This is our second to last slide. And so this is kind of your family checklist to make sure that you're clear on what you need to do in the next week before spring break, and then before we see your child at one point in the next 2 weeks in April. So the first is to make sure to review that student participation agreement. That's really, really important, and we need everyone's cooperation and understanding of what the rules are. The second is to help make sure your student has signed up for the Frontline Health Screening account, and if they are comfortable putting that app on their phone, that would make things run much smoother for us when we have to check in 300 students at a time. And then the student webinars, again, they're next Monday and Thursday from 1:30 to 2 p.m. each day. Your child only needs to attend one of them, so they have an option of which one they can attend. And also pay attention on Wednesday, the 24th, what group they're assigned to, A1, A2, B1, B2. And obviously, if you're traveling over break, please see or just review what Ms. Kennel had already said around travel restrictions and traveling and being conscientious. And then obviously making a plan for transportation. And there'll be more information this week in our community letter and Bear Notes. All right, and it looks like now we are moving on to questions and answers. And we tried to get to some questions in the Q&A, but I know there's a lot more. Simone, do you want to take this?
Yes, I'll take it.
Okay.
If somebody could help read some of the questions. I do want to address a theme that's come up in the questions about capacity and clarify that for people who are asking why we are not going up to 50% of our enrollment. The agreement was enrollment or capacity. So we had about just under 1,100 students opt in, 26 of those in the yellow tier, so most in red or orange. We are currently in orange. So when we had to look at classroom capacity, 6-foot distance, and do a master schedule, it was going to be impossible to do that with 1,100 students here. It would mean schedule changes, it would mean room changes, and we have 8 weeks to go in the semester. When families were originally surveyed about their priorities in returning, preserving teachers and schedules was one of the #1 things that was high priority on the list. Of course, we want students back. We want as many students back. We also have to make sure we can do that safely as we ramp up to having students on campus. MA is committed to making sure we can do that so that we can have a closer to full-time return in the fall. But please understand, a lot of the questions that are coming up this evening are in planning stages, and I can't commit to you a response. Those things will be communicated in various ways. They'll be communicated as soon as we have updates. They'll be communicated through the district. The superintendent is hosting office hours. MA is not an island unto ourselves. Some of these decisions are tied, most of our decisions are tied to county, district, and bargaining unit agreements. The concurrent instruction model is what the bargained instructional model is for this spring semester. That does not mean, we know it's not ideal, but it is a chance to get our students back coming to school, experience what that feels like. Some people have asked, how will you build community? We're going to do our best to do that. We're all going to be spirited. The school will be decorated. We're going to be welcoming. We want to see our students back. And we're going to do that to the best degree we can with the 9 weeks we have left in this school year, which also our decisions are for the most optimal instructional experience for the other half of our students also remaining on distance learning. So we have to balance the needs of the entire school. The capacity issue was resolved when we realized 1,100 students in socially distanced in classrooms was not going to work for the majority of our classrooms. So every student initially, the first 2 weeks, students will come for 2 days. During the first 2 weeks, we'll have up to 250, maybe plus minus, right, of those who opted in. And then starting April 19th, we will have 500 plus minus in those cohorts for the remainder of the school year. And that is the capacity that we can currently do with being able to divide the groups that we were able to. So for this semester, that's my answer to that question. And, you know, we are looking forward to it. We're excited about it. There's also questions about if a student comes and then decides to opt out. We ask that you make a commitment. We completely understand if somebody's sick, of course, you're going to stay home and then you would participate virtually. And if you come and decide to opt out, we would ask that you communicate that with your counselor or one of us, because clearly we want to be sensitive to needs. But opting in was not reserving a spot, because we've moved heaven and earth to balance classes, to do the groups, right? Opting in was, I'm committed because I want to come back to school, and we want to make this a safe and good and fun experience for students. Another reason we're asking for the lanyards is community building, right? Students are walking around with masks. We can't see their faces. They can't see each other's faces. So we want them to be able to know who they're in the room with and see who they're here with. So those pieces are not lost on us, but we are doing the best that we can given all of these circumstances to provide this experience. The Roomer Zoomer model, yes, students will be, for the most part, accessing their classes on the Zoom platform. Teachers have discretion, depending on the subject that they teach, to change that up. And that might mean more asynchronous work when students are not in person. But that has to be balanced with the students who are also participating virtually. So yes, while not ideal, it is the best of both worlds for the situation that we're in and for the timing to reopen. So I hope we can all see the cup that's half full here, and hopefully we'll get fuller as we get back to, gradual return to in-person learning. I don't know that we'll be able to get to, I did want to address that because that seemed to come up quite a bit. So I would ask that if one of my team members would not mind just going through and reading off some questions. We have about 15 minutes. And we're happy to answer any questions we may not have gotten to. I know I was about to respond to one. Will lunch zones be assigned based on grade level? No, they're going to be assigned based on location. So for example, if my class right before lunch is in the G wing, I'm going to eat in the assigned area for the G wing, right? Which means that might be my class before lunch on Monday. On Tuesday, I'm going to eat in the area assigned where my class is around lunch. And I think I answered that correctly for all of us, right? That
Well,
where you eat lunch will be based on the area where your class is located.
yes.
In our color-coded zones.
Yes.
Yes, we understand some students live far. The question about athletics, we're going to work with teams and coaches. But if it's a huge gap, we do ask students go home. We just don't have the bandwidth of supervision, but we will get creative. We will have some limited capacity for students. And I think I also responded to a question, if my student ends class at 1:10 and has practice at 1:45, well, that's not reasonable to have to go home, right? You would just report to where your team meets.
Can I add, Ms. Kennel, I would just want to add to that. I mean, just so everyone understands, we're so impacted right now with our facilities, and we're trying to get every team in and give everyone, all the student athletes, time to play and practice. That, I mean, we have practices happening from 2 p.m. until they're starting at 2 p.m., starting at 5 p.m., starting at 7 p.m. And so it wouldn't be feasible to be able to house everyone during that time. But we are looking at options, and I'm working with coaches and teams to try and figure something out.
All right.
I know a common question is coming up, Ms. Kennel, is will students be able to opt out should they not be pleased with the distance learning model of the Zoomer Roomer, and if they're also their teacher's not there?
So I think I addressed that one, but I can repeat. Yes, talk to us if it's really an experience you can't live with, but we did base this entire plan on a commitment to opt in. The majority of teachers will be present, but we can't guarantee that all a student's teachers will. And we are asking that you are here for the entire day if you're opting in, unless, of course, you follow our typical procedures to be excused to leave school, the same procedures that we follow when we're in person. So again, yes, the majority of teachers will be here, but there are some for which we will have another adult in the room with the roomers, the students who are there participating on Zoom. I think I answered that question correctly, or correctly, or gave options for that response. Are there any other questions frequently asked?
Okay, Simone, there's a question in Spanish that we can answer. And Rosalia asks, where can we see information about the schedule? And she asks if it's possible to select the days that students attend. For example, if one would want to attend classes Monday and Tuesday because that works best for the family, is choosing that particular day an option. And I would say that we, Mr. Loosecoat set forth the schedule that we will follow, Rosalia. And if you have questions about that, I can reach out to you. So if you still have questions after hearing the interpretation of my answer, I can speak to you as well. Y a propósito, yo hablo un poquito de español y puedo explicar lo que tenemos con respecto al horario. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in Spanish, Nick?
There is another one, and this is a question that's come up a couple of times. This is a question from Anna. Will the students stay in one classroom to take all of their classes? And that was a question I got in a couple of ways, and the answer is no. Students will be following their schedules and going from class to class, learning with different teachers. And there was another question about, do we require a COVID test of students before they return to our school? And the answer is we encourage families to find testing. We have testing right across the street from our campus, and we'll be sending out a more comprehensive list of resources for testing later. But we do not require that students test regularly or show us evidence of a negative test before coming on the campus.
Okay. I do see a question. My student does not have a 6 period, but then does have a 0. Where does the student wait sorry, it jumped on me. For some reason, the questions did. But if a student doesn't have a 0 or 6, where should the student wait?
I think the question was around if you have a gap in your schedule.
Those students will be directed to go to the library. And we've determined the exact number of students each period that have an unscheduled period. And we know that we can fit those students in the library. If they have an unscheduled period, obviously in the beginning of the day or the end of the day, we would ask that those students either, come late or leave campus. But if they have an unscheduled period in the middle of the day, they will report to the library.
Yes, and if they don't have a 0 period, we ask they leave after 6 period, because then technically they're done with their school day. Okay, let's see what else we can answer here. Team, see anything else we haven't addressed?
I see there are a couple of questions about transportation, Simone. One question asked, is Samtrans aware of what bus routes MA kids will be riding? And are they aware of the start date of in-person learning? Yes, yes to both. We've been working very closely with Samtrans, and our discussions have led to the reopening of the 81 route, both legs of that route, and the re-extension of the 286 route to come close to campus. And they are working to align their routes with our with our start time and also our dismissals. And there was another question around transportation. If the buses do not address your transportation needs, please reach out to me. I oversee transportation at MA, and we can work on a plan together.
I also saw a question about bus passes. Yes, the school provides bus passes for students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. We also sell reduced student bus passes here. So students can get those. I'm also going to put in the plug Mr. Nelson put in the Q&A about MA on the Move and the offer of bikes to any student who would like one. And we have plenty of bike parking on the campus. And then I think I saw another question about headsets. Yes, earbuds are acceptable, and we will also have some on hand for students. So students can have earbuds. And then I'll scan really quickly. Let's see what we might have missed.
I'm going to clarify because I'm getting text, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So if a student has an empty 0 or an empty 6 period, they would go home. If you
Yeah.
have an unscheduled period in the middle of the day, you would go to the library, and then after that unscheduled period, you report to your next class.
Thank you for clarifying, Mr. Loosecoat. Yes, if a student does not have a 0 or 6, they would go home because their instructional day would be over, just as it would be if they were coming to school in any other scenario. Okay. I think we've addressed most of the questions. And as I conclude things here, if my team sees any questions we might have missed, please let me know. I'm just going to end by saying thank you. We're excited for this. We would love, we're going to love to see students back on campus. We also ask for your patience. So teachers are going to be getting used to the technology, how to navigate it, how to conduct class with Roomers and Zoomers. Our professional development department is providing resources. So we're not going to get everything right, but we're going to work to figure out what we can do to make this the best experience that we can for our staff and for our students returning on April 5th and beyond. So I thank you for your time this evening. The webinar and the slides will be posted on our website for future reference. I believe we emailed out the slides as well, and they are available in English and Spanish. And we look forward to having students attend the orientations next week so that they can get the information that they need. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, please reach out to any one of us. So with that, we will end the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for participating this evening.